Alright, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to open up the 2019 free response questions, and let's start reading. So this is just a cover page. This is reminding me that about the time I have and a number of questions. I can assume that the interfaces and classes listed in the Java Quick Reference have been imported where appropriate, so I don't have to write any import statements. Unless otherwise noted in the question, assume parameters and method calls are not null, and that methods are called only when their preconditions are satisfied. Okay, so I can assume that they're not throwing any trick questions at me. In writing solutions for each question, you may use any of the accessible methods that are listed in classes defined in that question. Writing significant amounts of code that can be replaced by a call to one of these methods will not receive full credit. So this is saying use the methods that are provided to you. Alright, let's go ahead and start on question 1. Question 1. So the AP calendar class contains methods used to calculate information about a calendar. You will write two methods of the class. Alright, I have my class declaration, it's called AP calendar, and I have a method that's a static and it returns a boolean called isLeapYear, and it takes in the year, and implementation not shown. So I'm assuming this method returns, well, I'm not assuming, it tells me this method returns true if a year is a leap year and false otherwise. Okay, so I don't even need to know what a leap year is. This method will just return true or false. I should use this method to tell me if it's a leap year or not. Alright, this returns the number of leap years between year 1 and year 2 inclusive. So I have to include year 1 and year 2. There's an int, which is the number of leap years, method name, and it takes in the start and the end. And this is what to write, apparently. Okay, I have another method that returns the value representing a day of the week for the first day of year. So 0 denotes Sunday, 6 denotes Saturday, and everything in between. So basically, I pass it in a year, and it's going to return to me an integer value, right? Alright, so this one, day of year, it needs to return in with a month, day, and year. Specify the nth day of the year. So return 1 for January 1st. You know, I'm not quite sure what this method's doing. And maybe I'll find out later as I keep going. Alright, this method, called day of the week, it returns an int, takes in month, day, and year. It returns the value representing the day of the week for the given date. Okay, month for the given date, month, day, year. Where 0 denotes Sunday, 1 denotes Monday, and 6 denotes Saturday. So this is day of week. This is the first day of the year. Alright, and this returns in, where month, day, and year specify the nth day of the year. Alright. A little confusing. Let's go ahead and see if they explain a little bit more. So I need to write the static method number of leap years, which returns the number of leap years between year 1 and year 2 inclusive. In order to calculate this value, a helper method is provided for you. Okay, so they even tell me a helper method is provided for me. Awesome. isLeapYear returns true if the year is a leap year and false otherwise. Complete method number of leap years below. You must use isLeapYear appropriately to receive full credit. So returns the number of leap years between year 1 and year 2 inclusive. Alright, so what do I have to do? I basically have to check every year between year 1 and year 2 and see if those years are a leap year. And I need to keep track of the number of leap years between year 1 and year 2. Alright, so let's go ahead and write that as a pseudocode. So first things first. Alright. So I need to keep track of number of leap years. Alright? And not only do I need to keep track, I need to loop through between year 1 to 2, or I shouldn't say year 1 to, I guess the variable names, year 1 to year 2. Alright, so now let's go ahead and code that. So let's go ahead and make our counter. Let's go ahead and call it int num years. And I'm going to initialize that to 0. Alright, that's going to be the number of my leap years. Next, I'm going to go ahead and write a for loop. So for, go ahead and make a variable called int. I don't have a year variable yet, so int year is equal to year 1. And then I'm going to go, and when should I stop? When year, or how many times should I keep going? As long as year is less than or equal to year 2. Remember, I want to also check year 2. And finally, I'm going to increment by 1, so plus plus, because I want to check every year. Alright, so here we go. Now what I want to do, I need to use whatever year is, I need to pass it in to the is leap year function. Alright, so I need to pass it into this function right here. And that returns a boolean. And that's going to be true or false. So if it returns a true, then I know I have a leap year. So here's how I'm going to do it. If is leap year, alright, I'm calling that function. I'm going to pass it in my variable, which is called year. If is leap year, so that's going to return a true or false. If it returns a true, I need one more parentheses right here. Let's go ahead and rewrite that to make it look better. Alright. I pass in year. Then I'm going to count. I'm going to increase my counter, which is called num years. And I'm going to increment that. Num years plus plus. And I'm going to do this for the entire number of years between year 1 and year 2. So my for loop should end after I check year 2. Now, at the very end, don't forget I need to return an integer. And this integer should represent the number of leap years. So I'm going to return num years. Awesome. So I think I'm done. We'll go ahead and check that after we go through the entire FRQ. Let's go on and try the rest of it. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to part B. So here we have to write the static method of day of week, which returns the integer value representing the day of the week for the given day, month, day, year, where 0 denotes Sunday, 1 denotes Monday, and 6 denotes Saturday. For example, 2019 began on Tuesday, and January 5th is the 5th day of 2019. As a result, January 5, 2019 fell on Saturday, and the method called day of week 1/5/2019 returns 6. So this is the method I had to write day of week, and it passes in the month, day, and year, and the day of week should return 6 because Saturday is the 6th. As another example, January 10th is the 10th day of 2019. So as a result, January 10, 2019 fell on a Thursday, and the method called day of week 1/10/2019 returns 4. In order to calculate this value, two helper methods are provided. First day of year returns the integer value representing a day of the week for the first day of the year, where 0 denotes Sunday and so forth. And day of year returns n, where month, day, and year specify the nth day of the year. For the first day of the year, January 1, month equals 1, day equals 1, the value 1 is returned. This method also accounts for whether leap is a leap year. For example, the day of the year 3/1/2017 returns 60. Oh, okay. And then day of year 3/1/2016 returns 61. Alright, I think I'm kind of understanding what they're asking me to do. So is that alright? So let's go ahead and over here, let's make sure we indicate that this is 1A, and maybe we'll scroll down a little bit and fill out 1B. Alright, so what do I have to do? Let's go ahead and translate this into pseudocode. My method, day of week, takes in a month, day, and a year, and I have to return an integer value that represents the day of the week that this month, day, and year is on. Now, that would be very hard to do by myself. I have to write a lot of code, but thankfully they provide me two helper methods. First day of year that tells me what day of the year, what day of the week it is for the first day of the year, as well as this method. So let's just go ahead and run through some examples. Let's use their first day of the year. So for their first day of the year, it seems like if I pass in, so 2019 began on a Tuesday, so then it would return a 2. So this is all going to be pseudocode. So 2019 returns began on Tuesday, so return a 2. Alright, now this method though doesn't want to tell me, I just don't have to tell, or sorry, I'm not supposed to just write what the first day of the year is at. I need to be able to return what any day of the year it is on. For example, if I was to pass in, if I'm passed in month, day, year, let's say if day a week okay, and then I pass in 1/1/2019, right? And that's what this thing is showing right here. Sorry, it's not what that thing is showing. Day week 1/1/2019. That is the same thing as the first day of the year method, right? Where I pass in 2019 and it returns me the first day. So this should return a 2. Now if I pass in 1/2/2019, this should return, well, what day of the week is the second day of this year? Well, if the first day of the year began on a Tuesday, then the second day of the year should begin on a Wednesday, right? And I believe 0 is Sunday. Yes, 0 is Sunday, 1 is Monday, 2 is Tuesday. So Wednesday is a 3. And if we keep going, maybe we can find a pattern. So this would be 4, 5, turns a 6. Now, here's a question. Can there be a 7 return? What day of the week does a 7 correspond to? If 0 is Sunday, 6 is Saturday, then, I mean, I guess this would be a 7, right? But we don't have a 7th day of the week, it is just 6. So this should return a 1, which of course, sorry, it should return a 0 actually, almost forgot a 0. Yes, we have zeros represented, which corresponds with a Sunday. So whenever you see any repetition like this, where we go from 0 through 6 and then 0 through 6 again, you should be thinking of modulus. Somewhere down the line, we have to use a modulus. Okay, so let's maybe brainstorm a little bit. So this tells me need to use mod. Alright, so here is my pseudocode I'm making so far. In my method, I am passed a month, day, and the year. Okay, so first things first, I'm going to find out first day of year. Sorry. So my first day of year for 2019 would be a 2. Alright, it's gonna give me that. So here's my actual code, the start of it. I'm going to call first day of year, and it's going to return to me an integer. So I'm going to call that integer start. And I'm going to call first day of year and pass it in the year I'm given. What is this variable year? If you scroll down, it's the one, I'm inside the day of week right now. I'm writing this method, and it is the year that is passed in. So now I have start. Start is the first day of year, and it is a number between 0 and 6. So 0 through 6. Okay. Now that I have that starting value, I need to use that somehow to do something with this. Now, thankfully, I have another method, day of year, which tells me it returns in the day of the year. For example, the first day of the year is 1. This day of the year, March 1st, is 60 because March 1st in 2017 was the 60th day of the year. So I'm going to call that also. So find out day of year. So I'm going to go ahead, let's just call it, well, I'm already using day. So what would be another good method name to use? I tell my students I always use blah, but blah is a bad name. Let's go ahead and call this date. And I'm going to call the method day of year. And I'm going to pass it in. It takes in a month, day, and year. Right here. And it tells me that right here. And thankfully I have those variables exactly, month, day, and year. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass that down. Month, day, year. Alright. So let's go ahead and look at this example right here. I have start and date. So I know what this would be. This is what should return if I call day of week, right? Well, let's go ahead and try to correlate this. So first day of the year would return 2, right? This is first day of year. And I pass in 2019. Alright, so that is this 2 value right there. Now, I call day of year. Sorry, I shouldn't have capitalized that. Right? This would be a 1. This would be a 2. This would be a 3. This would be a 4. This would be a 5. This would be a 6. And this would be a 7. Okay. So how can I use this day of year and this first day of year in order to get these values? That is my conundrum. So let's go ahead and think about this a little bit, and we'll come back. Alright, how did it go? So this whole problem is finding a pattern between whatever first day of year returns, in our case it's 2, what day of year returns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and getting it to the day of the week to return something between 0 and 6. So let's go ahead and see how we can find that pattern. I have first day of year and day of year, and these are the things I call start and date. So how can I get 2, right, day of the week 2 from 2 and 1? Also, don't forget, right, I have this repetitive pattern between 0 and 6. So earlier, I realized I need to use modulus somehow. Let's see, 2. Well, if I just do first day of year and I mod it by 7, 2 mod 7, right, is 2. So that'll give me that. But this one, if I do 2 just the first day of year mod 7, it doesn't give me 3. I need to use this day of the year somehow. What if I add it together? 2 plus 1, right, is 3. And if I mod that by 7, well, it's gonna give me 3, not 2. So what about 2 plus 1? How can I get it to return 2? What if I minus 1? 2 plus 1 minus 1 is 2. Mod 7 is 2. And you might be asking, why am I modding by 7? Well, again, I'm trying to get a number between 0 through 6. In order to get a number between 0 and 6 every time, 7 is the number you want to mod by. Alright, what about, does it work? 2 plus 2 is 4. If I subtract 1, that's 3. 3 mod 7 is 3, yeah. 2 plus 3 is 5. 5 minus 1 is 4. 4 mod 7 is 4, yeah. 2 plus 4 is 6. 6 minus 1 is 5. 5 mod 7 is 5. That works. 2 plus 5 is 7. 7 minus 1 is 6. 6 mod 7 is 6. And then 2 plus 6 is 8. 8 minus 1 is 7. 7 mod 7, there's no remainder, so that's 0. And then 2 plus 7 is 9. 9 minus 1 is 8. 8 mod 7 is 1. So it works for my example. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that down. So I'm going to scroll down. I need to return that value. So this is my pattern. Find pattern. I'm going to make this an integer. I'm going to call it what? Day val. And it's going to be equal to start plus date. And I subtracted 1, and I modded all of that by 7. Right? And I found out for my case, it worked. Hopefully it works for all of them. Now if we look here, here's another one that we can try out. Let's go ahead and write return day val. Alright, for the first day of the year, the value 1 is returned. Alright, so 1 is returned. 1 plus 60 is 61. 61 minus 1 is 60. 60 mod 7, 4956, that's 4. I don't know if March 1st lands on a 4th, which is Thursday. So they don't really give me other test cases. Hopefully this is correct. Alright. So we look at the FRQ tips. I read the problem. I broke it into chunks. I tried, explaining to myself what was happening. And then I kept going because I didn't understand everything at the beginning. And I looked at examples given a problem to help me understand. I translated a problem to pseudocode and then to code. And I didn't forget the method header. I looked at what was given to me. I looked at what I have to return. They didn't really give me much examples in this one. Don't forget, partial credit is awarded. And I haven't been keeping track of my time because I'm trying to explain as I go. But you should. And note exam. Awesome. Let's go ahead and go to question 2. So question 2. Go ahead and go up here. Question 2. Alright. This question involves the implementation of a fitness tracking system that is represented by the step tracker class. A step tracker object is created with a parameter that defines the minimum number of steps that must be taken for a day to be considered active. Okay, so object step tracker class provides a constructor in the following methods. Add daily steps, accumulates information about steps and readings taken once per day. Active days, it returns the number of active days. And what does active mean? It's whenever I take a minimum number of steps. Both average steps, returns the average number of steps per day, calculated by dividing the total number of steps taken by the number of days tracked. Table contains a sample code execution sequence and the corresponding results. So here I am creating a new step tracker object called TR, and it has 10,000 steps. So this 10,000 is the minimum number of steps that must be taken for a day to be considered active, and it tells me that. I assume the parameter is positive, okay? So upon creation, I have 0 active days because no data. There's 0 average steps, and then I add daily steps. So this is too few for the day to be considered active. This is too few, so there are still 0 active days, but there's an average step. I add more steps. Alright, so I think add daily steps is void. It doesn't return anything. Active days, it counts how many active days there are. It turns an integer. Average steps, it looks like it returns a double. Alright, so I think I have enough to keep going. Just gonna double check this is recording. Alright. Oh, so I had to write the complete class. Alright. So let's go ahead and go. Alright, this is number 2. So to write a class, I need public. I'm gonna make it public class step tracker. I don't know how much space I'll need. Maybe I'll just put a thing down here. I can always erase and make it lower. Now this class has a constructor and 3 methods. Now, what are the instance variables for this class? I need to keep track of the number of days as well as the number of steps total taken. How do I know that? Because here I'm dividing the number of steps I've taken by the number of days, right? And so I had to somehow keep track of that. But at the same time, I also need to have a value that keeps track of my lower limit of how many steps I need to take for a day to be considered active. So right now I'm thinking I need 3 values. So let's go ahead and make them all private. The AP exam really likes you making your variables private. And I could write this all in one line. I'm just going to separate them all in separate lines. And I think they're all int values. And I'm going to call this one min active. This one is going to represent the number of steps, total steps. and then this one will represent the num days. Alright, awesome. Now, I'm going to go ahead and write my constructor. So constructors, don't forget, always have the same name as a class. So public is getting in the way of my pen. Public step tracker. And what does it take in? It takes in a value, and I'm just going to call this active. And what this does is it sets min active to active. Now, I could also give values of 0 to total number of steps and num days, but the thing is that they already have a value of 0. Okay, so I don't really have to give it a value. If you want, I could write it out like total steps. Zero and num days is 0. But that is unnecessary because they're instance variables, and because they're int instance variables, they have a default value of 0. Alright, now I need a method active days. So active days is going to be public. Now, does it return anything? So notice I'm using the step tracker object I created. So this is not a static method, okay? Because I'm using the object I created to do it. And it depends on the object. So I need to create an object for these methods to work. So I'm not going to write static. Active days, it returns an int variable. If you look right here. So I'm going to make it int. And then the method name is active days. And it takes in nothing. How do I know that? Because right here, nothing there. And what does this method do? Well, it's just going to return the active days. Returns a number of active days. Maybe I need another variable to represent the number of active days. Let's go ahead and make that active days. And this is different from num days because num days is just the total number of days I've done something. Active days is going to be the number of days I've made my minimum number of active steps. Alright, so this is going to return active. Now this is confusing because I named my method, I named my instance variable the same thing as my method. Now because this is I don't have parentheses, it knows that it's using a variable, but how about I just make things simpler and less confusing on everyone? And I named this num active days. And that is very confusing as well. Int private int num active days. Alright. So instead of returning active days, I'll return num active days. Awesome. So I have my constructor, my instance variables, and one method. Go ahead and go on. I'll probably need more room. Put it down here. Alright, average steps. So this should return the number of average steps. So notice it returns a double because there's a 0.0 in the example problem. Not active steps, average. Take anything. And what this does is it returns the total number of steps, right? If we look here, total number of steps divided by number of days. So return total steps divided by num days. Now this will cause a problem because total steps, again, is an int. Num days is an int. If an int and an int have a kid, the kid will be an int as well. So we won't get this 0.2. It would just be 10.222.0. So before I divide, I need to cast one of them into a double. Let's just go ahead and cast the rightmost one, so I don't have to erase as much. And this will be, I think I named it numdays. Numdays. Awesome. So an int and a double, they're always going to have a double kid. All right, and I think I need one more method. Add daily steps. So public, this returns nothing, because if we look here, blank if no value, nothing is returned. Public void add daily steps, it takes in a value, int steps, and let's go ahead and write that. I might need more room, we'll see. So I need to add the steps that is passed in to the total steps. So total steps plus equals steps. I also have to increase num days by 1. Num days plus plus. Finally, I have to check if it is greater than this min active. If it is, then I increase the number of active days by 1. So I probably need more room. Nothing wrong with that. Here. Alright, so if steps is greater than min active, then what will I do? I need to increase num active days by 1. So num active days plus plus. Alright, I think that's it. I could go ahead and go through all my code and test it to make sure it does what I think it does, but I think I'm at a good spot right now. And let's just go ahead and go on to number 3. That's 1, 2. Go ahead and stop here for number 3. Now number 3, if you forgot, is all about arrays and Arraylist. Let's see which one I'm working with. Many encoded strings contain delimiters. A delimiter is a non-empty string that acts as a boundary between different parts of a larger string. The delimiters involved in this question occur in pairs that must be balanced, with each pair having an open delimiter and a closed delimiter. There will be only one type of delimiter for each string. Following are examples of delimiters. The expressions of mathematics use open parentheses and close as delimiters. For each open, there must be a matching close. So this is valid because open, close. This is not valid because there are more open than close. So open, open, one close. HTML uses angle brackets as delimiters. For each open one, there must be a matching close. Okay. There is no matching close delimiter. Okay. So here we have to write two methods in the following delimiters class. Here I have open close delimiters as instance variables. I don't have to write that. I have to write this right here. So I need to write get delimiters list. Wow, it takes in a 1D array of string objects, and I need to return an array list of strings, right? And isBalance takes in an array list of string objects, and I need to return a boolean, and this boolean is true if the delimiters are balanced and false otherwise, as described in part B, as described in part A. So I'm going to go ahead and go on to A and B to see what I'm doing. Alright, part A. A string containing text and possibly delimiters have been split into tokens and stored in a 1D string array called tokens. That is this thing that's passed in. So each token is either an open delimiter, a closed delimiter, or a substring that is not a delimiter. You will write the method getDelimiters list, which returns an array list containing all the open and closed delimiters found in tokens in the original order. So I have to preserve order. Okay. The following examples show the contents of an array list returned by getDelimiters list for different open and closed delimiters in different tokens arrays. The open del, so that is the instance variable, it's a string. Closed del is a string. Tokens is the 1D array of string objects that's passed in to my getDelimiters list. And I need to, I guess, construct this array list with only if it matches open del and closed del. Looks like here, open del is this, closed del is this. Here's my 1D array of string objects that's passed in. And it looks like I have to construct an array list based on looping through. And I notice also I have to preserve the original order. So here's first thing, second thing. Alright, so let's write down what we have to do. I need to loop through string array. Right. I could do this with a for loop. I could do this for each loop. Am I modifying what is inside the string array? I am not. So I'm going to use a for each loop. Yes. And let's see. Check if string matches instance variables. Yes. If it's true, then I need to add to Arraylist. And then I need to return Arraylist. Okay, so I think that's my pseudocode. I need to go through this tokens 1D array, and if anything matches open del or closed del, then add it to my array list. So here's my method. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, before I forget, let's go ahead and construct my array list. So this is going to be an array list, and it's going to be string objects. I'm going to call it blah. Now, blah is a horrible name. Don't copy that. The reason why I always use blah is to show to my students how horrible of a name it is. Is a new array list. It's going to contain string objects. And alright, let's go ahead and loop through the string array that is called tokens. So for each string object, I'm going to call S inside the tokens array. Right, so I always encourage my students, make the for each loop make sense to you syntactically. The way I read it is for each string object that I'm going to call S inside my whatever I'm looping through tokens array. I'm going to check if the string, which I'm calling S, matches any instance variable. So if S, and there's no matches if I look at the quick reference, I see I can use equals, right? And because strings are objects, I have to use equals. If S dot equals, and what was the variable called? Called openDel. And or I can use or if S dot equals close del. If either of those are true, then what I'm going to add S into my blah array list. Alright. And then after I'm done with my for loop, I've looped through the entire tokens array. I need to return my array list of string objects. So at the very end of it all, I'm going to return blah. Alright, and let's go ahead and make sure I say this is 3A up here. And here I'm going to go to 3B. So let's go ahead and try my code out. I create an array list of string objects. I loop through from beginning to end. Is this equal to that? Yes, I add it. Is this equal? No, I don't do anything. I just go on. Is this equal to any of those? Yes, I add it. And I preserve the order. Seems like it works. It's gonna be. So, write the method isBalance, which returns true when the delimiters are balanced and returns false otherwise. The delimiters are balanced when both of the following conditions are satisfied, otherwise they are not balanced. When traversing the array list from first to last, there's no point at which there are more closed delimiters than open delimiters at or before the point. The total number of open delimiters is equal to the total number of closed delimiters. And here are some examples. So we see open, open, close, close. This works. Condition 1's violated. Conditions 1 violated. Alright, so I need to loop through this array list. And so let's go ahead and write that down. So loop through list. And this array list will only contain open and closed delimiters. So it's either going to be an open delimiter or it's going to be closed. And it seems like I need to keep track of the number of open and closed. The reason I'm saying that is because it says there's no point at which there are more closed. So the number of closed delimiters can never exceed the number of open delimiters. So check if open or close, and check, and then if it is increment variable, so I need to have a variable to keep track of it. Check if them close greater than open, and after I loop through my list, afterwards is check if num close equals open. Alright, so I'm not modifying my delimiters list at all. Let's just go ahead and write it with a for each loop. So for each string object, I'm going to call s inside my array list delimiters. I need to check if it's open or closed. If s dot equals open delimiter, then I'm going to I need to make a variable up here outside of for loop. Go ahead and int num open num close equals 0. So both of them are 0. Then I'm going to increase num open by 1. And I know that it's either going to be open or closed. So I'm going to write an else num close plus plus. Now I need to check if the number close is greater than open. And if that is ever true, according to condition 1, then I need to return false. Let's go ahead and try to write that down. So if num close is greater than num open, I just return false immediately. But if it's not greater than, then I'm just going to reach in my for loop. I'm going to check the next string and so forth. Awesome. Let's go ahead now and assume that I've gone through my entire array list of delimiters and it all works. At the very end, I need to check condition 2. The total number of open is equal to the total number of close. So if num open, and because they're primitive int objects, I can use double equals num close, return true. And I'm just going to put else right here. You don't need to. You can just write return false, but I'm going to return false. Alright, and let's go ahead. That should be my code. Awesome. You can check it right here if we wanted to go through this array list. So this is open delimiter. Is num close greater than num open? No. Open. Again, you can go ahead and check your code to make sure it works with all these test conditions. Something like this would be what I consider an edge case. You can check to make sure it works for that. Let's see. They're both 0. It's not an open delimiter, it's a close, so num closes is 1. Num closes 1, num open is 0, so that would return false. Yes. So it seems like it works. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and go on to number 4. So number 4. Here. So the Lightboard class models a 2-dimensional display of lights, where each light is either on or off as represented by a Boolean value. Okay. So you will implement a constructor to initialize the display and a method to evaluate a light. So I have an instance variable of a 2D array of Boolean variables or Boolean values called lights, and I activate a constructor, num rows and num columns, constructs a lightboard object having num rows and num columns for in 0, and each light has a 40% probability of being set to on. Alright, so 40% probability. Whenever you look at something with probability, you should be thinking of math.random. And thankfully, they have one right here, right? And using that math.random or some other random number generator to get that 40% probability. And this method, evaluate light, evaluates a light in row, index row, and column, index column, it returns a status as described in part B. So I just need to look at whatever's at that row and column and see if it is true or false. Maybe. Alright, so here I'm going to write the constructor, which initializes lights so that each light is set to on with 40% probability. The notation lights RC represents the array element at row R and column C. Alright, so first, lights is already declared. I need to use this instance variable to construct my 2D array. So, construct 2D array. Now, after I construct my 2D array, I need to go through and have each light to have 40% probability of being on. So after I construct it, I need to loop through array and assign true with 40% probability. Right, true represents the light is on, and it says that right here, true is on, and 40% probability of being set to on. Alright, let's go ahead and start. So, lights is a new Boolean 2D array of num rows and num columns. Let's go ahead and loop through that. I'm just going to use nested for loops for int row is 0, row is less than, how do I get the number of rows? Lights. So 2D array, 1D array of 1D arrays. How do I get that? Okay, so size is for Arraylist. Interesting. They don't have an array. Well, thankfully I remember. It's dot length. And it's not a method. And row plus plus. And inside that, we have another for loop for the columns. I'm going to go through all of them. So columns is less than lights row dot column plus plus. And what I need to do for each thing, each entry, is assign true with 40%. So let's go ahead and do that calculation. I need to use math.random. Now the thing about math.random is it returns a random value, a random double value greater than or equal to 0.0 and less than 1.0. So it's between 0 and 1, exclusive of 1. So if I know that, what would 40% correspond to? Well, if it returns something between 0 and 0.4, that would be 40%. So here's what I'm going to do. If math.random, if this method call returns to me something below 0.4, right? Then I'm going to assign it to be true. Lights, what was it? Row column is true. And I'm just gonna include this right here. Else it is false. when we go through the explanation and all the code later, we'll see if that was necessary. So math.random returns to me a random value between 0 and 1. If I want to mimic a 40% probability, well, 40% of 0 through 1 is anything less than 0.4. You can also think of it as anything greater than 0.6, right? Or if you want anything between 0.2 and 0.6, you just need something that has a 40% probability of being given out of the whole set. So math.random, if it returns to me something less than 0.4, then I'm going to set it to true. This represents the 40% probability. Is that all? Loop through array and assign true 40% probability. And I don't need to return anything. I think I'm good. Alright, let's go ahead and go to part B. So write the method evaluate light, which computes and returns the status of a light at a given row and column based on following rules. If the light is on, return false if the number of lights in its column. Oh, this is a lot more complicated than I thought. Let's go ahead and make this A. Go ahead and make this 4B. Alright, so 3 conditions apparently. If the light is on, return false if the number of lights in its column that are on is even, including the current light. So, okay, if the light is off, return true if the number of lights in its column that are on is divisible by 3. Otherwise, return the light's current status. For example, suppose that lightboard sim is new lightboard 7x5 creates a lightboard with the initial state shown below, where true represents a light that is on and false represents a light that is off. Lights that are off are shaded. Right, these are all off. So thankfully they give me an example. Evaluate light 0, 3, that would be 0, column 3, turns false. Right, because this is on, so it returns false if the number of lights in its column that are on is even. So there's an even number of lights that are on. Yes, 6, 0. That would be row 6, column 0. Turns true because the light is off. Turn true if the number of lights in the column are divisible by 3 that are on. 6 divided by 3 is evenly divisible. 4, 1. This is false. So the light is off, return true. The number of lights in the column that are on is divisible by 3. There are 5 lights that are on. So I don't return true. I just return the light's current status, so that should be false. And 5, 4, 5, 4, light is on. I should return false if the number of lights in the column that are on is even, including current light. Well, there are only 5 lights, so I don't return false. I just return the light's current status. Okay. Wow, so it all depends on apparently the columns, right? So this really makes you have to know 2D arrays and how to navigate. Let's go ahead and go. So I'm going to check what this light currently is. Right. So check light. So let's go ahead and get that. Boolean status is, I'm going to look through my lights array at the row and column. So if status, so if status is true, so that is the first one, right? I need to look at the number of lights in the column. If status. So I need to loop through all the lights in the column that are on. Okay, so let's go ahead. I need to keep track of the number of lights in the column that are even. So I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to call it nem on is 0. Now let's go ahead and loop through this. So for int column, so I'm looping through columns, so it's good to make your variables mean something. Column is less than lights. Oops, I spelled that wrong. Row dot length column plus plus. Let's go ahead and give myself more space. All right. So I'm going to be looping through all the columns. Sorry, I should be looping through all the rows for this column. Oof. Good thing I caught myself. Alright. I think I caught myself. Go ahead and make that row. Row is less than lights dot length row plus plus. So I'm going to be looking through all the rows for this column. If lights row and column, that variable is given to me right here. That's the column I'm looking at. So if this light is on, I'm going to increase nem on by 1. Okay. Okay. And now return false if the number of lights in its column that are on is even. So after my for loop, I'm going to go ahead and check if nem on is even. If nem on mod 2 is equal to 0, it's even, return false. Alright. Wow, that's a lot of code for one test case. Alright, so if status is off, right? So else, this is the second test case. If it's off, return true if the number of lights in its column that are on is divisible by 3. Huh. Wow, I could probably simplify my code by having this nem on outside the if, but, you know, time crunch. Do it again. Int nem on is 0. Or what could I do is I could just automatically calculate the number of lights, right? Because I had to calculate the number of lights in the column that are divisible by 3. Wow. Alright, I'm going to continue writing code, but after I write this code, I'm going to go ahead and simplify it so y'all can see what I mean. Alright, so let's go ahead and write that code again. I still have to look at. Oh. Wait, I don't want to name it row. Yeah, let's name it R because I'm already using row up here. Just pass in. There we go. Alright, so I'm just going to copy that up there. Whoops. Int nem on to R is 0. R is less than lights dot length R plus plus. Again, I'm just rewriting this code all over again. If lights column num on plus plus. Alright. And then I have an if after the for loop, if num on mod 3 is 0, then I return true. Alright, otherwise return status. This is condition 3. Alright, so I think it works for this. I'm at the end. Now I'm just gonna go ahead and refactor this. So if you notice, I repeat this code 2 times, this for loop, right? So what I could do in order to improve my code is no matter what, I need to calculate the number of lights that are on. So why don't I just go ahead and do that first? So here's what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and write int num on 0, write my for loop for int r is 0, r is less than lights dot length r plus plus if the light is on, so if this is true, then num on plus plus. Okay. Now I check the status. If status is true, then that's condition 1. So then I have the if num on mod 2 is 0, then return false. Else the status is off. So that means it's the second case where number of lights is divisible by 3. So I return true. Now if I get through all of this, then is when I just return status. So you see I didn't have to rewrite that for loop to calculate the number of lights that are on 2 times. Alright, so that's me going through all of this code, and I'll go ahead and put screenshots of my code that I wrote onto code images. And hopefully afterwards we can go ahead and look at the grade, look at the rubric, grade together, and see how we did.